The Rangers had just about as bad of a weekend as they could possibly have, getting swept by the team with the worst record in baseball, and the injuries just somehow find a way to keep piling up. We're going to talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into today's episode, the injury bug continuing to bite the Rangers, a little bit of interesting data that MLB revealed on StatCast, what it tells us about this inconsistent Rangers offense, and more. But first, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Now, the Rangers have been probably the most injured team in baseball, and the month of May has just gotten silly. Just downright silly, ridiculous, absurd, with the amount of injuries and bad injury updates, bad rehab updates that continue to plague the Rangers. Now, when I last recorded this episode on Friday, the Rangers were not in a great spot with the injury bug, but over the weekend we got even more bad injury news. Now, on Saturday, Evan Carter was scratched late from the Rangers lineup. He dealt with lower back issues earlier on in his career. His first pro season was pretty badly derailed with a stress fracture in his lower back. His age, I believe it was his age 18 season, because he was so young when the Rangers drafted him. He only played 32 games that year. Looked really great for Loe, but didn't play past June because he tried to play through a back injury and ended up getting worse, and he missed the rest of that season. And apparently back issues were flaring up again. The two concerns with Evan Carter, after having an amazing first month to 2 months of his big league career, coming in, being the little savior for the Rangers, propelling them to a playoff spot, and then being an absolute spark plug for them in their World Series run, he headed into the season as not the top prospect in baseball, despite an amazing showing in the playoffs and in that final month, and being only 21 years old. There were 2 questions about Evan Carter. Can he hit lefties? The answer so far has been very much no. And also a little bit concerned with that back issue. Now, Evan Carter missed that Saturday game, was not in the lineup on Sunday, and is going to see a back specialist today. We'll see how much that issue is going to plague him, if it's going to cause an IL stint. Carter said he tried to play through this earlier in his career, and it ended up derailing his season. He said he'd rather have him be told that it's just nothing, it's just something that's in his head, and then miss a couple of games early on now, as opposed to it spiraling and becoming a much bigger issue later. But the Rangers also got some bad news on Max Scherzer. He got a cortisol injection on Friday, played a little bit of catch without any issues. Then in his Saturday bullpen, a tricep issue ended up popping up. The Rangers believe it's a nerve issue, not a ligament issue. But again, there's just another setback for Max Scherzer, who had everything gone right since his first rehab start. He would be rejoining the Rangers rotation at some point in this series at home against the Cleveland Guardians. That is absolutely not going to be the case. He will still need at least 2, maybe 3 rehab starts from whenever this issue clears up. But Scherzer was pretty vocal about one reason that he thinks these arm injuries around pitchers have been so bad lately. He said that the sticky stuff crackdown has not really had the hampering of offense that the league thought it would. The offense has not really exploded like baseball thought it would after the sticky stuff cracked down, and the injuries have been, much worse since then. At least the severity of the top pitchers getting hurt. I mean, we've had a Garrett Cole arm injury that has derailed his season so far. Thankfully, he hasn't had to have Tommy John surgery so far, but we've seen the several injuries that Jacob deGrom has had the last few years. Max Scherzer has not dealt with injuries basically at all in his career until the last few years, and he thinks that sticky stuff had an impact on that. Corey Yates talked about the slickness of the balls being an issue, and Tyler Glasnow talked about it the last time that he had a major elbow issue, that, this sticky stuff crackdown, it's making pitchers grip these balls harder. It's not the only thing that's leading to these injuries, but it's definitely what they say is a factor. Scherzer says it's a factor. Dr. Keith Meister says that it's a bit of a factor, so maybe the league might want to crack down a little bit less, be less severe with their sticky stuff ban. Now, I think it had gotten to a place where it was, pretty prevalent and having a pretty big impact on the game of baseball when it was at its peak. But maybe letting a little bit of sticky stuff back in could help these pitchers stay healthier. They are chasing velocity, they are chasing extreme spin rate, and it is clearly leading to some kind of impact on durability. But Max Scherzer wasn't the only new Rangers injury news that they got this weekend, and same with Evan Carter. Carson Coleman, who was the Rangers' Rule 5 pick from the Yankees, he wasn't supposed to make his debut at all this season until maybe July, coming off of UCL repair surgery. I don't think it was Tommy John specifically, but he had a setback and he is not going to pitch at all this year. If there is another surgery that is involved, he might miss all of 2025 as well. I'm not entirely sure if the Rangers will retain his rights since he won't pitch for the Rangers this year. I'm not exactly sure how that works on the Rule 5 capabilities. Usually your Rule 5 guy has to make at least one appearance for you in order to retain his rights. I think he might end up just going back to the Yankees since he's not going to pitch this year, but I'm not entirely clear on that. But this series, just losing all three in Colorado, it's rough. It is a rough way to end this road trip that started out so promising. Taking two out of three in Kansas City, who is a very good team, and stealing one in the finale, that was great. Taking 3 out of 4 in Oakland, and the only loss was in a doubleheader. That was huge for the Rangers. And their offense looked like it was starting to, get on track. They had, multiple 15-run games in this road trip. And then the offense dried up when you go to Coors? What? Are you kidding me? That's the place where offense is supposed to thrive. And the Rangers starting pitching, which was their biggest concern heading into the year, and they keep having more and more and more and more injuries and derailments of guys that they thought would be back in this rotation early on in the season that haven't been. They've been forced to go to guys like Jose Urena, like Jack Leiter earlier than they would have liked to. And the starting pitching has been the Rangers' greatest strength. It's been the one thing that hasn't really cracked at all this year. Granted, there were a couple of rough starts early on in the year, but as these guys have started to go down with injuries, the Rangers starters that are still there and still healthy have stepped up. John Gray has a 2.36 ERA on the season. Andrew Heaney has been so solid since those early rough starts. Michael Lorenzen has been fine for the Rangers, and Urena has been so good for this Rangers rotation when he has been asked to step up. I mean, going the distance that he did in this finale, 6 2/3 innings, just 2 earned runs, only 1 walk. And the Rangers starters this whole series have been fantastic. We'll get to them a little bit later on, but just this feels like that series last year where the Rangers got swept by the Reds in 2 1-run games and 1 2-run game. They got walked off in 2 out of those 3 games, and the bullpen was just such a glaring issue. But in this one, it was the offense that just wasn't consistent. The Rangers, in their 1-run performance on Sunday, an absolutely atrocious offensive outing, they had 5 at-bats with runners in scoring position, went 1 for 5, did not have a single extra base hit. They only walked twice, they only struck out 3 times, but this was just not a whole lot of offense for the Rangers this whole weekend in a place where offense absolutely thrives. It is definitely a concerning stat. There are definitely some concerns about Adolis Garcia and him just having an absolutely atrocious month. Like it's been awful for him. in the month of May. In April and March, he had 29 games and 118 plate appearances where he had 8 home runs, 7 doubles, hit just 7 points below 300 and 932 OPS. But in the month of May, for Adolis Garcia, it has been atrocious. He's hitting just 167, an on base of 208, a 395 OPS. 395 OPS. That's not a good slugging percentage. And that has been his OPS in the month of May. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the next Ranger injury that we don't really know about just yet that pops up, because he just has not looked right. I mean, after looking absolutely amazing, he was, not walking at the rate we saw last year, but he was squaring up fastballs high in the zone. He was not chasing at an atrocious rate. It was just a not great rate, which with Adolis Garcia, that's enough to be an absolutely destructive hitter. And he just has not looked right. It has been really rough for him. It has been really rough for a few other Rangers hitters. Coming up to talk about the new data that StatCast unveiled and what it shows us about this Rangers offense and why this season is starting to feel like 2014. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Policygenius. Life insurance is an important safety net for your family, but sometimes trying to find your own policy can be time-consuming and overwhelming. That's why Policygenius is here. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. You can talk to a team of award-winning agents who walk you through the process step by step. Easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Your work life insurance may not be enough protection to meet your family's needs, so Policygenius gives you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. They've got no incentives to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description of this show to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. Now, there's not much to look at this Rockies series and think, okay, that was a good thing. Outside of this rotation, we'll get to that later on in the show. But for the most part, this was just an absolutely atrocious weekend for the Rangers. It was a great road trip leading up. The Rangers were surviving this absolutely insane rash of injuries. The offense still hasn't felt like it's clicked, despite having 2 15-run outbursts in a 7-game span. Actually, I believe it was like a 4 or 5-game span. It feels like this offense is a bit of a mirage right now, but the Rangers were doing enough, and the mantra heading into the season is stay around 500, stay in the AL West chase until July when these big names start getting back. Who knows when Max Scherzer is going to get back at this point? Who knows when DeGrom is going to get back and Mahle is going to get back? And there's still all these bats that are on the IL, and Adolis Garcia hasn't looked quite right. But the Rangers are pretty much doing the job. They're now out of first place in the AL West, half a game behind the Seattle Mariners. The Astros continue to be atrocious, and they keep having more injuries, and they're in the stretch of, I believe, 29 games in like 30 days. It seems like it's about to get worse for the Astros, and thankfully the Rangers aren't playing them because the Rangers have a losing record against the Astros, which is kind of wild given where the Astros record is overall at this point. But this was kind of like last year's Reds series where everything felt terrible. The questions that the Rangers had about their team were getting more pronounced. Last year was the bullpen that was trash, and this wasn't a great bullpen weekend for the Rangers. But the good news is right after that series where the Rangers got swept, and then right after that they got more bad news about DeGrom, and they lost that first game of the Yankees series, and then Nathan Eovaldi took the hill and said, don't worry guys, I got this. And after that complete game, the Rangers just absolutely took off. The month of May, that series against the Reds was in the end of April, and the month of May, the Rangers, well, they were in a pretty good spot heading into the month of May. They were 17-11, but they weren't quite sure that this was a good team, a team that was going to make the playoffs, a team that ended up winning the World Series. But after that, in the month of May, the Rangers went 18-9 and just absolutely took off. They just did not look back from that point. Obviously, August was just the messiest month in terms of, winning 8 straight, losing 8 straight, and everything, kind of got off the rails there. But because of that month of May, because they head into June, which they were barely above 500 in June and suffered a lot more setbacks then, but because they built themselves up that bit of a cushion, things were okay. They were able to make the postseason and then ended up winning the World Series. And right now, there wasn't a whole lot of reinforcements that were coming for them late on in the season. That's not the case for the Rangers this year. They've got reinforcements that are on the way. But in 2014, the Rangers haven't had quite a 2014-like season. Everything went to absolute crap in 2014 because not really the amount of injuries, although the amount was kind of staggering looking back, but the severity and the career derailment level of the injuries. I mean, it started with Profar's issue with his shoulder in spring training. He was supposed to miss about 2 months. He missed the entire season, and he just wasn't really the same level of player from then on. They also had the incredibly weird Derek Holland dog staircase injury, where he missed most of that season. Prince Fielder, who was the picture of durability, ended up missing 120-ish games, maybe not quite 120, with an ultimately career-ending neck injury. They also had Matt Harrison suffer a back injury that ended up derailing his career. Martin Perez had Tommy John surgery. Yu Darvish had an elbow issue that shut him down in August and ended up getting Tommy John surgery that early in the next year. And it was just those kinds of injuries that were piling up. So far, the Rangers haven't had any injuries that seem like they're going to be career derailing. Maybe the stuff with Max Scherzer, just with his age, you obviously don't want that for it to be career derailing, but it's a little worrying. But it's not like there's some young prospect that has had some, well, I mean, I don't want to speak too soon with this back thing with Evan Carter because I was already really scared about it. But thankfully, it hasn't quite been that. And I don't think that Bruce Bochy is going to resign at the end of the year and the Rangers, have a losing record. They were all right in 2014 in the beginning of the year, but things just got a little bit worse. I mean, in the month of April, they were 15-12, and then they had a losing month in May, and then they had every month was a losing month until September, which I don't even get me started on the Rangers and Tim Bogar keeping the Rangers from the number 1 overall pick, which would have been Alex Bregman. Instead, they go with Dylan Tate, and we all know how that went. But all that to say, the Rangers are still in an okay place. It's not a great place, and especially with the bullpen blowing multiple leads. Don't get me wrong, the offense should have done a lot more this weekend, but the bullpen blowing multiple leads like they hadn't this year, that was concerning. Seeing just a straight up bad game from David Robertson, it's concerning. It happens even to the best closers, even to the best bullpens. They still blow leads occasionally, but seeing it twice in one weekend was definitely a cause for concern. But I want to talk about this new stat a couple of new stats that baseball MLB is releasing to the public about bat speed, about batted ball data, which have been, I found really interesting. It's still only, 2 months, not even 2 months worth of data. So there's not a whole lot you can extrapolate here, but there's basically 2 different types of hitters that have, succeeded because of this batted ball data. There's guys like Luis Arias who have very low bat speed, but, make great contact and, do enough with bad pitches that they can succeed. Those guys are the ones that are doing well in the stat called squared up rate. Now, it's kind of difficult to understand. We're still kind of getting our heads around what all of this means. But basically, your squared up rate, each swing has a max attainable exit velocity based on the pitch speed and the speed on the swing. So basically, a squared up ball is if a hitter gets 80% of the maximum exit velocity. They get 80% or more. So like doing enough with a pitch, that's considered a squared up rate. Now, Marcus Semien has not been exactly the StatCast darling data. His exit velocities aren't great, but he still hits for power. He still has a great offensive output, and this is kind of putting a number on that. His squared up rate is his contact percentage of competitive swings only is 40.6%. That is Technically, it's second best on the Rangers to only Robbie Grossman, who has a 60% squared up rate. That is how Robbie Grossman also finds success. He's not hitting the ball incredibly hard, but this is one of the things that makes Marcus Semien good, and he's not just good for the Rangers. He's the 22nd best in all of baseball. The guy who's number one is Blake Perkins, a hitter on the Milwaukee Brewers. Second best in all of baseball is Juan Soto. Now, you can either have fast bat speed, usually, or you can square up balls, do the most with bad stuff. Well, Luis Arias is fourth best in baseball at this squared up rate in terms of his swing percentage. Not only is when he's making contact, but just that includes the swings and misses. He is the best in baseball at squared up rate in terms of his percentage swing. Now, bat speed. The Rangers are not one of the better teams in terms of bat speed. That is the Yankees. Giancarlo Stanton is the king of bat speed. And bat speed alone, it's not the only thing that makes a hitter good. The Rangers' best bat speed is belonging to a guy who you might have heard of, Wyatt Langford. Actually, excuse me. It's Jared Walsh. The average bat speed leader for the Rangers is Jared Walsh. Now, we saw what Jared Walsh did. The bat speed alone will not carry you. Langford has the Rangers' best bat speed of anyone who's still on the active roster, including the injured list. 74 miles per hour. That is a mile and a half an hour better than Adolis Garcia, who is second. Then you have Zeke Duran and Kisner at number 5. Marcus Semien is down in the low range of bat speed. Robbie Grossman is obviously the lowest at 65.1 miles an hour. Very not great bat speed. Then Jankowski, then Marcus Semien. It's just kind of interesting data to keep an eye on. Coming up, we're going to talk about this Rangers rotation doing well, and who among these hitters is someone who should be getting more plate appearances with the inconsistency of this Rangers offense. Right after this word from our sponsors. This is brought to you by PrizePicks. Get on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. PrizePicks has something for every sports fan. From baseball to basketball to League of Legends and everything in between, you can pick LeBron, Shohei Ohtani, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals and easy gameplay, and an enormous amount of players and stat types. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 fantasy sports app. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now, the Rangers offense hasn't really been going pretty much at all this season, but despite the fact that it feels like this Rangers offense is just nowhere near what it was last year, they are still scoring a decent amount of runs. When we look at on-base percentage, and the Rangers are at the third best on-base percentage in the American League. But when you look at slugging, and when you look at OPS, this Rangers team is down more towards the middle of the pack. If you look at slugging percentage, the Rangers are slugging as a team .397, which is 13th in Major League Baseball. They're behind teams like, well, the Royals. They're behind teams like the Orioles, who are leading Major League Baseball with a .442 slugging percentage. And when we look at OPS in general, the Rangers are the 10th best offense in baseball. But you want to look at run production. And the Rangers have scored the 3rd most runs this year in all of Major League Baseball, ahead of the Padres, Brewers, Yankees, Orioles. This Rangers team is just straight up good in these critical situations. And Corey Seager has been, for the most part of this year, a shell of himself, but he is starting to look like he is coming out of that. That home run, the go-ahead home run, ended up being a game-winning home run in Oakland last Monday. That looked like that was starting to jolt him from his early season slumber. He's got a 9-game on base percentage. In the last 7 games, Corey Seager has 2 home runs. He has is hitting 296, an on base of 355, and slugging 556. Things are starting to trend upward a little bit. He had a home run, a big home run, and a double in the first game of the series, then did not have any extra base hits. The rest of the series in Coors, we thought that this might be another place for Corey Seager to start stepping out of his early season slump. And the Rangers have had a couple other hitters that have been incredibly hot, including Leody Taveras, who has a 15-game on-base streak. In that streak, he's hitting 346, an on-base of 424, and slugging 577, 3 home runs in the last 15 games. We've seen this from Leody Taveras. He has been able to be a very streaky hitter in his career. Last year we saw it in a massive way, and he started off in a really rough way coming back from that oblique strain. Offensively, he just was not great to start the year. There was a lot of talk of calling up Evan Carter straight from Double-A early on in the year because Leody Taveras just was not doing well offensively. Then he had that series in Kansas City where he went off offensively, and from that point on, he was basically an all-star caliber player up into the All-Star break. Then the second half, bad streaky Leody Taveras kicked in. But good streaky Leody Taveras is a very good hitter, and he's been very helpful to this Rangers lineup, being able to scratch out these wins, being able to scratch out these games, where they do score 15 runs, because the Rangers are so good with runners in scoring position. And another bat who I think should be getting some more at-bats is Ezekiel Duran, who has been just straight up on fire since the calendar turned over to May. He's played in 10 games in this month. He's only started 8 of them. He's only gotten 28 plate appearances, so he's not necessarily playing the entire games that he's in. But since the calendar turned to May, in those 28 plate appearances, he's hitting 500, the 536 on base percentage, slugging 539, so just the 1 extra base hit. He's only had 2 extra base hits all year. He had a 502 OPS in the months of April and March combined. And in the month of May, he's got a 1,074 OPS. So more than doubled his OPS in the month of May. And it seems like he is going to be getting more of those opportunities. He's been getting a lot of singles, been getting more walks than I'd imagine. He's only got 3 strikeouts in those 28 plate appearances. He's a much better defender in the outfield than Robbie Grossman, and I think he should be getting the vast majority of the games, especially while Evan Carter's out. I mean, I think Zeke Duran should be the Rangers' everyday left fielder. If the Rangers want to DH Robbie Grossman against lefties, that's fine, but the Rangers have been also giving quite a few at-bats to Davis Wenzel as of late. He's played in 17 games. It's just been such a rough slog for Wenzel. He's hitting .069. He doesn't have a walk in 29 MLB plate appearances, and he only has the 1 extra base. He's only got 2 hits, and one of them was the homer, and one of them was the single that was his first MLB hit. And it's just been kind of rough to watch, but there's not a whole lot else the Rangers can do. I mean, this offense just needs more people to get going. It needs Seager to kick it up. Nathaniel Lowe has been stepping it up. Jonah Heim has been stepping it up. Leody Taveras has been stepping it up. Evan Carter's been in a rough way, and Adolis Garcia has just been in such a terrible slump. But again, I think the Rangers have the bats to kick it up a notch with this offense. But the thing about this team that has been so impressive has been the starting rotation. With all of these injuries, the rotation in this series at Coors, granted, it's not the most deadly Rockies lineup we've ever seen. It's probably one of the not as good lineups we've seen from the Rockies. But this rotation absolutely did its job in Coors. The starters combined for 17 2/3 innings, just 5 earned runs, 18 strikeouts, just 2 walks, and only 1 homer in 3 games. That's nearly averaging 6 innings per start, 1 out shy of it, more than a strikeout per inning. Around a sub 3, maybe around a 2.5-ish ERA. It's just nuts how good this rotation was, and the Rangers couldn't win a single game because the bullpen is starting to be stretched a little bit thin. We're starting to see some cracks in this bullpen, having to use some guys that you wouldn't normally in higher leverage situations because of the injuries. Josh Sborz' second stint on the IL with a right rotator cuff strain is going to be more than his first stint. He missed 18 days in the first stint, so it's going to be probably at least 3 weeks. Who knows how long that'll end up being. The Rangers are still looking for some more help in their rotation as guys are starting to come back. It's probably going to be Jack Leiter's third MLB start on Tuesday's game, and then it's going to be John Gray on Wednesday. And so we'll see how much help this Ranger team can get. It's so weird to try and make sense of what this Rangers team is at this point, and it feels like an impossible task because everything that has happened to this team with the injuries and with Corey Seager not hitting and now with Adolis Garcia in such a mired stretch and just the insane amount of injuries, it feels like if you go a day without some new injury or worse injury development popping up, that's a win. Even if the Rangers lose, it's like, all right, well, nobody new is hurt. It's just half the team that we already know is already hurt. It's just, but still, this team is above 500. Still, this team is a half a game out of the lead in the AL West. They have not been below 500 at all this season. They are just 2 games above 500 at this point. And right now, according to Baseball Reference, they still have a 50.8% chance to make the postseason and a 1.5% chance to win the World Series. It's easy to get caught up in a weekend like this being absolute dookie garbage crap because it absolutely was. But you got to remember that even the best teams, even the teams that win the World Series, like the Rangers did last year, the Rangers had stretches like this last year. They'll have a series where everything goes wrong and more people get hurt and you lose close games and it just feels overwhelming. Heck, they had the entire back half of the month of August. After this Rangers team looked incredible and unstoppable for the first 15 days of August, they looked incredibly stoppable and like nothing good was ever going to go their way in the entire back half of August. We all remember that, right? We remember this team coming back from facing insane adversity. This is an insane level of adversity. I mean, there is such thing as the World Series hangover, but it feels like way worse than just a World Series hangover with the level, the more the amount of the injuries than the sheer level. But there's not that many of these injuries that are season ending at this point. We'll see if they end up getting that way, but it's just one after another, after another, after another, after another. And this team has been able to suffer the slings and arrows and get back on track. Just keeping that broader picture is probably the best way to keep from losing your mind in what has been an insane and weird and wacky start to this season. But heck, given the history of this Rangers franchise, why would we not expect the season after winning a World Series to be anything but incredibly wacky? That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.